Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's episode where we spoke with Sabrina Brown, Director of Recruitment at the Graduate School at University of North Carolina in Charlotte. We discussed her innovative approach to recruitment, including how she transformed regular information sessions to better meet the diverse needs of students, offering more tailored support on topics like funding, application tips, and life in Charlotte, North Carolina. Sabrina also emphasized the importance of listening to student feedback throughout the entire student life cycle, from prospective students to current students to alumni, and how that feedback has directly shaped the recruitment efforts at University of North Carolina, Charlotte. Tune in for an insightful conversation about the role of student feedback in shaping educational experiences and the importance of truly understanding your international students. And here we go. Hi, Sabrina. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came into your current field and position?
Absolutely. So, a little bit about me is that I grew up a military kid in Eastern North Carolina and a base there. And that's what actually brought me to UNC Charlotte as an alum many, many years ago, that we won't say. But really, my lived experience showed that education was just so extremely transformational to me. And I remember chatting with a mentor of mine, and I was like, why can't I just do what you do? Like, I just love students and impacting students. And she was like, well, this is a real job. And so I kind of went through student affairs. I worked in housing. I worked with low income scholarship support programs, academic success, and just kind of was trying to find, what was the functional area that was the most impactful to me. And then when I was looking to kind of return to be closer to family, I saw a position in graduate recruitment and advising. So it was sort of a dual role, full student life cycle. And I really just fell in love with it. As much as I loved, incoming first year students, I loved the experiences of graduate students and really seeing the impact that graduate education makes in the lives of those and their career and their dreams. And I just really loved seeing people navigate their life, which at times was challenging, to be better. And so I just find that extremely inspiring. As a first generation college student, access is always super important. I didn't even know what a graduate degree was when I got to college. So I love being able to be in this space because I get to create opportunities for people to explore and achieve their dreams. So that's how I kind of ended up, because I just love Charlotte so much. And so now I'm in this role as director of recruitment. And in that role, I get to manage a team of recruiters and graduate assistants and ambassadors, graduate ambassadors, and things like that, and really just refining what it means to navigate a graduate experience at UNC Charlotte.
That's great. Thank you so much for that background. I'd like to hear from you. What do you think is the most valuable thing about student feedback when it comes to ensuring a positive application and enrollment experience, specifically for international students?
Absolutely. In my career, I've found that I would find myself sort of in rooms strategizing around how do we talk to prospective students? What do we share? What do we put on our website, our socials? How do we connect? And I would find that the question about what students think and what prospective students think was always sort of missed. And I felt like I was always kind of calling in that experience when we were sitting there talking about, we can talk about ourselves all day, but what do people actually need to make the best decision for themselves? I think graduate education is a big lift for anyone, regardless of whether you're coming directly from your undergraduate and maybe you're able to maybe focus on your graduate education solely. And then we span to people that have children and spouses and careers, and they're trying to sort of manage a lot of competing priorities. And so when we start thinking about who are we to people, we've got to keep those people central to that. I think that there are a lot of ways that we can collect student feedback, but for me, there's no replacing a student or prospective student's experience. If we're continually sharing information that isn't helpful, that doesn't help people see themselves at our institution, in our programs, and it doesn't help them kind of visualize what their future success will look like. And so I think as often as I get reports and am in meetings about numbers and headcount and credit hours and how we can expand that and our opportunities, we have to remember that these are people and that they're having experiences. And I think for international students in particular, I shared this the other day as well. I just have such admiration for international students. Everything that they know to be their foundation is shifting when they think about education abroad. And so I find it a deep responsibility of professionals in my field, as well as myself and my team, to make sure that we are helping them navigate that experience as smoothly as possible. And we know that there are a lot of barriers that they have that domestic students don't have. You're working with government entities, much less the personal and academic shift in experience. And I just find international students so passionate about their future and about their goals that I would feel as though it would be a disservice to not tap into their voice to really understand what are your experiences with our institution, with our programs. And I think student feedback, if I may, should be cyclical and through the full student life cycle. We're constantly talking to current students about what would have been helpful for you to know. I think we'll talk about how that's influenced some of the things that we do here at Charlotte differently based on that student feedback. But keeping that central, I can't get into the minds of these folks and their experiences unless I ask them, and we can't be afraid to truly ask, which means we might have to brace a little bit if we hear things that don't align with the success we hope that we're offering to folks. But I think it's just critical. It's so poignant, and I don't think that we can do our work without the student voice, whether that's on the prospective student side or the current student and alumni side.
I think we know in the higher education sector that it's quite a privilege to be able to get those insights. And I can see very well that in your work and at UNC Charlotte, prioritizing this has wonderful benefits, critical ones, both for students and I imagine for the institution as well. So thank you. This actually leads quite into my next question for you. When you talk about feedback and reaching out to students, can you share a little bit about the methods you use to collect that feedback? How do you analyze that feedback, and how do you utilize it in a way that is most useful, let's say, for prospective international students or current ones?
Sure. So we have, standard sort of ways when we do information sessions, we offer, 3 to 4 a week for folks to tap into. So we're consistently asking, what was this experience like? What would have been helpful to include? What wasn't as relevant to you? Um, and, even with our students, or excuse me, prospective students that apply and are admitted but choose not to come here, we ask them, of course, that's a little bit harder to get feedback on because they've moved on. But we like to understand, what was that critical decision point for you? Was it finances? Was it location? What were the things that might be in our control that we can speak to? In terms of, those are just a couple of examples. There are a lot of ways. Of course, we've got access to data and we can see, how people are spending their time on our websites. And that gives us a lot of really good information. Who's visiting from where? And that's really impactful. And then when our students get here, we try to be very intentional about the things that we're hearing from them. Sometimes that's very formal in terms of surveys or focus groups that we have, or sometimes it's just chatting at events, or someone comes into the office and has a random question and you start having conversations. One thing that I do weekly with my staff actually is, as they're having individual kind of counseling, admissions counseling appointments with folks and with our ambassadors monthly as they meet with prospective students, what are you hearing? What are the trends? Because you're not always going to get survey responses, even if you say, hey, we'll give you a t-shirt or, a gift card or something like that. And so sometimes you do have to be thoughtful about what are the themes that are popping up for people. What are people worried about, concerned about? What are the types of questions that you're receiving? And so being really intentional to say, what are we hearing, right? And I do that weekly with my staff and monthly with our current student ambassadors and GAs. And I think, again, on the current student side, it's about that relationship building. We hear from our graduate program directors and programs that are saying, hey, this is kind of popping up a lot, or I noticed that we're struggling with this, or this went really well. The feedback doesn't always have to be sort of this critical criticism or something like that, right? Oftentimes it can be, this was really good, like don't stop doing this, or this is something that was really cool that happened at Charlotte and I haven't seen another institution do that, or this is really integral to my experience. And I think having internal partnerships and not making sure that we don't have silos, right? We work very, very closely with our international scholars office, students and scholars office. We have monthly enrollment meetings, and we don't just talk numbers. We do talk about that and how are, I-20s going and all of that. Are we seeing anything in the global market that's challenging? But also, what are you hearing from folks? And that definitely impacts our recruitment efforts.
If a university, for instance, and an admissions office does not necessarily rely on feedback in their recruitment, in designing or strategizing the recruitment efforts, can you suggest a couple of points on how to get that going, where to start, and through what formats?
Absolutely. Um, I know that, can be a challenge. There are so many things that, we're asked to do that have to get done. And so sometimes things can feel like they are pushed to the periphery, like they're nice to haves, but they're not need to haves. And I think the basis of it is going to come from a mind shift. I think in higher education, particularly in enrollment management, we spend a lot of time talking about who we are, and saying we're great and we have these rankings and that's important, but we don't always center the person in the process in terms of who are you? How about we find out who you are and then we find where you fit. If I can find out who you are and find out your dreams and goals, I that allows me to create some transparency around whether this is a good fit for you or not. The reality is we want to have really great students that love their experience at Charlotte. If you come and chat with one of my recruiters and have an admissions counseling meeting and you're not finding either quite the right program makeup, whether it's modality or curriculum or outcomes, then it's just not a good fit. And me trying to kind of stick you in a program that's going to take years and a lot of money and time and investment, that's not going to be a good experience for us. It's not going to be a good experience for you. And so I think it becomes a mind shift of really prioritizing. Now, that's hard to do on a large scale. I get that. But I think some really simple, low hanging fruit things are tapping into the people that are talking to your prospective students, whether it's your front desk, whether it's admissions counselors. You can do that regardless of how large or small you are as an institution. And I think training people to really be active listeners and good note takers and documenters to, really be thoughtful about what they're hearing from prospective students and current students. I think you can also do simple surveys, whether it's after events. I think if you're at recruitment fairs or things like that, just having genuine conversations with people and asking them, what are you concerned about? There are some higher level things that we're even looking at, such as having dynamic request for information forms. So instead of saying, what's your name? The stock standard, the boilerplate form is, hey, what's your name? When are you interested in enrolling? What program are you interested in? And maybe a couple of other pieces, email, phone number, things like that. And so we've been playing around with the idea of dynamic RFIs, which are what are your top 2 or 3 concerns? And then we can speak to that. So if somebody says it's funding, it's living in the US, and it's managing a job at the same time, right? We can maybe speak to that in some of our communication plans, right? We can, instead of saying, here's who we are and all of our rankings and all of this, we can say, hey, you told us that you're concerned about funding. Here's our funding page. Here's also, some funding resources. Here's a session that you can go to. And so you're giving people what they're actually looking for and asking for to make the best decision for themselves. And so that gets a little higher. Of course, we're talking about student feedback, but we can't ignore the things that we get from students just through their applications, through website traffic. And while that's not specifically one-to-one feedback or many-to-one feedback directly from the student, it does tell us a lot about who people are, where they're coming from, where they're spending their time again on our websites and things like that, because we know that's the first thing they're going to, Google or some other search engine, and they're coming straight to our websites. It's the most accessible. You can do it at any time. And so if I think one other tip I would give is that we have to remain nimble. I think if you work in enrollment management, you know that one cycle is never similar to the next. And you can think, man, that last cycle, we did so great. We knocked that out of the park. And then other things will come up, whether it's global politics, economies, world economies, just general interest in higher education, travel, pandemics. There are tons of things that come along that you have to adjust for. And I think enrollment professionals, one of their greatest strengths has to be adaptability and context shifting. Some of the things that we also do, again, that's not specifically student feedback necessarily, and in some ways it is. We look at job markets, right? We know that's very important for international students, especially for international students that may be interested in staying and working in the US. What are your job outcomes? Not just salary, that's a big part of it, but can I get a job? Can I get sponsored? Can I get a job in my field? And we're constantly pulling on alumni to tell us those things in our first destination surveys. Where are you ending up? Where are the companies that you're ending up? What are your salaries looking like? What are the positions that you're getting? Was that in alignment with what you thought you would kind of come out of graduate school with? And if not, that doesn't just speak to our career center. And here we're very lucky to have a center specifically for graduate students that focuses on career outcomes and career readiness and things like that. But it's going beyond. And so I have a very good relationship with our director of our Center for Graduate Life. And we talk consistently about, what are you seeing? Not just what are people worried about when they go to enter the career and workspace, but where are they landing and are they happy with their outcomes? I can sit on a session and tell you what our statistics are, but it's so much more impactful when, one, I have a current student who is an ambassador on that call talking about their experiences in career readiness, but can also talk about and highlight alumni and their experiences. And that is a form of feedback. And I think I just get really passionate about this because I think sometimes we can consider front-end enrollment sort of in this silo, and that's just what we do. We do this cycle and then we move on to the next cycle, and we can't do that without consistent 360 evaluation of the student life experience. I can't tell you about how great Charlotte is if I stop at when you take your first step on campus. It has to be when you walk across the stage and beyond.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much for those examples. You had mentioned a few minutes ago rankings. And it is my understanding that UNC Charlotte was just granted quite a significant ranking, and a bit of a unique one, actually, in terms of subject. So, can you just share a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So there is a company out of Pittsburgh called F1 Hire, and they look specifically at career outcomes for international students. And what I love about this ranking, and I'll be a little selfish in this, is that when you look at rankings in the US, it's important to look at methodology, and sometimes it can be focused on how well known, name recognition, who knows who. and those reputation pieces, and not necessarily on specific data. And so that's what I love about this ranking. So we are ranked number 27 in the United States for the best career outcomes, specifically for international students. And we are number one in the state of North Carolina. So what that is, and their methodology is based on number of international students that we have. So they only look at institutions that have 500 or more international students, and we have far more than that. And they look at salary, job placement, where folks are getting their jobs, levels at which folks are getting their jobs. And it's not just based on what's reported back, it's based on, US labor statistics and things like that. And looking at where alumni are ending up as well. And what I will say is that we have some pretty big competitors in our state. We have Duke University. They have very high international student populations, and we were able to kind of show our value in our part of the state. I think something that people don't think about with Charlotte, they either don't think about it because we're not, New York or LA or maybe a bigger city that shows up, but we have a lot of really great, amazing opportunity for careers, for internships, for OPT and CPT, and all of those things that we know matter.
So really a big congratulations for that. It's quite remarkable. It says a lot about what you do for your students and the level of support. And again, that prioritization of the student experience that is very unique. So I want to thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us.
It's been a very exciting conversation, and thank you all for listening.